Hey students, so today we're looking at Chapter 2, Lesson 6, which is dividing decimals. And this is our last lesson in Chapter 2. So we'll start out with our learning target. Today it says, I can divide decimals. Nice and short. And in our math books, we're open to page 94. So pause and get there if you're not there. At the top of page 94, we have our key idea about dividing decimals by whole numbers. So basically, the main idea here is that wherever the decimal is in the question, underneath your division bar, you're going to move it straight up into your answer when you're dividing decimals by whole numbers. So we're going to go ahead and write down that key idea, dividing decimals So the main thing we want to remember is we're going to move the decimal up into our answer. And you can do this before you do any division. You can move it straight up before you even look at the numbers, which is kind of nice. So let's go ahead and get to our examples, keeping that in mind. So example 1 on page 94 is dividing decimals by whole numbers. So it says find 7.6 divided by 4. Now, one thing that I see a lot of times in my classes is that students see a sentence like this, a number sentence like this, and they're not sure which number is the divisor and which number is the dividend. So when we're looking at this, the number that comes first is going to go underneath the division bar, and the number that comes second goes on the outside of the division bar. So we have 4 on the outside, and we have 7.6 underneath. So that's just a reminder. So the one that comes first goes underneath the bar. It kind of is flipped backwards if you look at it. Okay, so now if we look at our key idea, we have a decimal sitting right here. So we're going to put that decimal right up into our answer straight above it. So that's where it's going to end. So now we're going to do regular division as if the decimal wasn't even there. So we're going to say, how many times can 4 go into 7? Well, 4 go into 7 one time with some remaining. So 4 times 1 is 4. So we put our 4 underneath our 7 and we subtract. 7 take away 4 gives us 3. Now we don't worry about this decimal. We're just going to bring down our 6. So now we have 4 into 36, and 4 does go into 36 evenly, which is nice, and it goes into it 9 times. 9 times 4 is 36, and when we subtract, we get no remaining. So 7.6 divided by 4, our final answer would be 1.9. And that was question A. I probably should have put an A on that one. Now let's go to question B. Question B says find 4.38 divided by 12. So 4.38 divided by 12. Once again, the number that comes first goes underneath the division bar. So we'll go ahead and make our bar 4.38, and the 12 goes on the outside. Here's our decimal, so we'll go ahead and put it right up into our answer right away. Now 12 cannot go into 4, so we have to put a 0 in that place holding spot. 12 can go into 43. It's not going to go in evenly, but it can go in 3 times with some leftovers. So 3 times 12 would give us 36. So we're going to write our 36 underneath our 43 and subtract. When we subtract, our 3 needs to borrow, making it a 13. And that's going to become a 3. 13 take away 6, so a 7. 3 take away 3 is 0. So we have 7 remaining if we put 12 into 43 3 times. We're going to bring the 8 down now. Now we have to ask how many times can 12 go into 78? And 12 can go into 78 6 different times. If we did 6 times 12, that would be 72. Now 78 take away 72 leaves us with 6. Now we still have a remainder, but we've already brought down everything we have up here. So what we have to do next is extend our division bar, put a 0 next to our 8, and we're going to bring the 0 down. We need to keep going until we have no remainder. 12 now into 60. Well, we're lucky because 12 does go into 60 even a number of times, and it's 5 times. So we only had to increase it by one more number. 12 times 5 is 60. And when we subtract, we get no remainder. So the answer to 4.38 divided by 12 is going to be 0.365. Okay, so now if we look at the bottom of page 94, there are 6 on your own questions. So you can pause the video and try a couple of those, especially because division can be a little bit tricky for us. So go ahead and try just a few of those to check and see if it makes sense to you. Okay, if you did your division, number 1 should be 18.2, number 2 is 3.7, number 3 is 8.52, number 4 is 3.09, number 5 is 1.55, number 6 is 0.195. Go ahead and glancing at page 95, there's a new key idea there. It's all about dividing decimals by decimals. It says, and if you look at the example, multiply the divisor and the dividend by a power of 10 to make the divisor a whole number. What that means is if you look at their example, 1.2 is on the outside. They're going to take that little decimal and move it to the right one place so that it now is a whole number instead of a decimal. So the decimal on the inside of the division bar also has to be moved one place. So instead of 1.2 on the outside and 4.56 on the outside, we have 12 on the outside and 45.6 on the inside. So we're going to follow that example when we look at example 2. So in our notes, example 2, there is an A and a B on these ones. A says 18.2 divided by 1.4. Once again, the number that comes first goes underneath our division bar. And the number that comes second is on the outside. So following that example in the book, we have a decimal on the outside. So we're going to move that decimal one time over, which means we have to move it one time over here. So if I rewrite the problem, now that I've moved my decimal, I have a 14 on the outside, and I have 182 on the inside since I moved those decimals one time so that they're out of the way. So now, since our decimal is sitting here, we're going to put it right in our answer up top. 14 cannot go into 1, so we're going to move on to 14 into 18. 14 can go into 18 one time. We're going to put that 14 down here, and we do have some remaining. We have 4 leftovers. Next, we're going to bring down our 2, 14 into 42. And 14 can go into 42 an even number of times, and it's 3. And 14 times 3 is 42. We do our subtraction, and we have no remaining. So our final answer would be 13.0, or just 13 wholes. Moving on to question B. On page 95, it says find 0.273 divided by 0.39. 0.273 divided by 0.39. So again, that first number is going to go underneath our division bar. Second number goes on the outside. And we again have a decimal on the outside. So just like before, we have to move it out of the way. But this time we have to move it 2 times to get out of the way. So this decimal has to be moved 2 times as well. So if I rewrite this the way we're going to actually solve it, my number on the outside becomes a 39. And this is going to be moved 2 times, so we have a 27.3 underneath the bar. So moving our decimal straight up into our answer before we begin. If we take a look here, 39 into 27, 39 can't go into 2, so that's why I skipped to 27. It cannot go into 27. So in front of the decimal, there's going to be a 0. 39 can go into 273. Now, my brain doesn't know exactly how many times right off the bat. So what I would do to solve this is to, on the side, do some guessing and checking. So you could go 39 times and then guess a number over here, maybe like 6, and figure out what would my answer be and will I get to 273. When you do this guess and check work, you're going to find that it can go in 7 times, and it actually works out perfectly. 7 times 39, if you were to do that side work over here, ends up with 273. So we end up with no remaining. So our final answer becomes 0.7. Taking a look back at our book, we have again another set of on your owns, number 7 through 10. So pause the video and try just a couple of those using the same strategies. Okay, number 7 is 8. Number 8 is 17. Number 9 is 9.41. And number 10 is 0.9. Turning the page and looking at page 96, we have example 3, where it says we're inserting zeros in the dividend and in the quotient. So we have to insert some zeros this time. So we'll change pen colors here for our next example and get to it. So for example 3, there's only one problem. It says divide 2.45 by 0.007. Lots of zeros there. So we have 2.45 divided by 0.007. So we'll go ahead and set this up the same way. So we have our first number underneath the bar and our second number on the outside. So starting out the same way, I'm going to take my decimal and move it 1, 2, 3 times this time because we want that to be a whole number here. So if I move it 3 times, I end up with a 7. Now if I take this decimal and move it 1, 2, 3 times, I have an empty slot here. And when we have empty slots, we have to put zeros in those empty slots. So we have to extend our bar a little bit. So we'll go ahead and make some more space here. And this becomes a whole number of 7 on the outside. And 245 plus that 0 makes it 2,450. So now we just do regular division. Our decimal is here, so we're going to put it right up there in our answer. And we may not need it in our final answer, but we'll take a look. 7 does not go into 2, so let's go 7 into 24. 7 can go into 24 3 times, and 3 times 7 would give us 21. Get to a new page here. We're going to have to go on the second page. So if we subtract, this gives us 3, and that gives us 0. So we have a remainder of 3. So we're going to bring down our 5, making it 35. 7 does go into 35, and it goes in evenly. 7 times 5 would give us 35. So 5 times 7, 35. No remainders. A lot of kids at this point would stop, but we still have this empty slot up here that we need to fill. So when we bring down our 0, 7 goes into 0. We were going to say up here 0 times. So we still have to fill that empty slot with a 0 before we can finish. So instead of saying our answer is 35, we'll say our answer is 350. So 350 would be our final answer. So we definitely don't need the decimal on the end, but you could, if you put it there, it's not going to be counted wrong. And our final example is example 4. Before we get there, if you'd like to pause and try the on your owns, almost halfway down the page, there's 11 through 14. Okay, number 11 is 23.75. Number 12 is 20. Number 13 is 150, and number 14 is 60. So our last example here for this lesson is our real life application. So we're going to figure out where would we use this kind of stuff in the real world. So we have example 4. On page 96, it says, how many times more cellular phone subscribers were there in 2011 than in 1991? And round to the nearest whole number here. So one thing I want to really focus on here is the first sentence. It says, how many times more? Now, a lot of kids will see the word times and think you're going to be multiplying in this question. But when you see the words how many times more, when you see that, we are going to use division to solve. That's a key thing we need to write down here. So the information that they give us in this chart is that if we take a look at the cell phones in the 2 years that they're looking at in the question, which would be 2011 and 1991, the 2011 number, let's write that one down, 331.59 from the chart. And then we need the cell phones in 1991. If you look at the chart in 1991, it looks like there's 7.6. And also, I want to point out on the side of this chart, it says the subscriber numbers are in millions. So this is not just 331.59 people. This is millions of people that have cell phones. That would make more sense. And then one more key piece that they tell us here is we're going to round to the nearest whole number. That kind of helps us figure this out a little bit easier. So if we take a look, we're going to use division for this problem. So we're going to divide our two numbers. We're going to take 331.59 and we're going to divide that by 7.6. Now this one is just like our last examples where we have to move our decimal one time here and one time here, and then it can go straight up into our answer. So if we rewrite this problem, we have 76 on the outside now, and we have 3315. Our decimal is there in our 9. So we can put that straight up into our answer. So let's get started. 76 cannot go into 3. It also cannot go into 33, but it can go into 331. So again, on the side, I would do some guessing and checking to figure out how many 76s would get us closest to 331. And if you did a couple guesses and checks, you would get 4. 4 times 76 would give us 304. So we can subtract and figure out what's left over. If we make this an 11 and borrow from here, 11 take away 4 would give us 7. 2 take away 0 gives us 2. And 3 take away 3 is nothing. So we bring down our 5 as our next step. Now we're going 76 into 275. Well, if I know 4 times is 304, my guess is 3 times is going to get us close to 275. So if you did 76 times 3, you would get 228. Now we'll go ahead and subtract again. So this becomes a 15 and we borrow from the 7. 15 take away 8 would gives us 7. 6 take away 2 gives us 4. And then 2 take away 2 is nothing. We bring down our 9. Now, a lot of kids would stop here because the question says to round to the nearest whole. And you're like, okay, well, 43 is a whole number. However, if we're rounding to the nearest whole number, we need to figure out what this number is right here in order to figure out if we're going to bump this 3 up to a 4 or whether we're going to keep this 3 the same. And that's how you round to the nearest whole. You need to know what this next number is first. So we do need to take it out one more time, but we don't need to keep going on and on and on because we're rounding it off. So 76 into 479. Well, we know that 4 times 76 is 304, so I know my number is going to be a little higher. So if I do 76 and guess and check, the closest you can get is 6 times. 76 times 6 is 456. So now I'll subtract, and this gives me a 3, a 2, and a 0. Now, this is when I would add a 0 and bring it down and continue on. However, again, our thing says to round to the nearest whole. So if I look at my decimal I'm sitting here, this 6 is going to make this 3 go up to a 4 if I'm chopping the decimals off and I'm rounding it off to the nearest whole number. So we would say about, because this is a rounding number, 44 times more. So our original question said about how many times more cell phones were there in 2011. than in 1991. There are about 44 times more if you round it to the nearest whole number. There is one more on your own at the very bottom of page 96. If you'd like to try it out, pause now. Okay, and the answer to that last on your own is about 5 times more. Go ahead and stop the video and we'll work on our practice assignment in class. That's the end of chapter 2.